Hey Flock, welcome to the Epic Hobby. Today I'm going to be painting the crawler for Privateer Press's Monsterpocalypse. Now, I'm going to be painting this in my comic style, but unlike the Belcher, this model doesn't really have much in the way of flesh. You're not going to see very much of that green, slimy flesh I was doing, except a little bit under the belly, which is going to be primarily black because I'm doing the comic style with it. So you're going to get a whole lot of just kind of metal exposure, and there's sort of some power areas that'll be painted in the purple color I used for the small little slash on the side of the Belcher. So this is going to be a very different look compared to the Belcher when it's done. So I'm going to begin by just getting my base coats out. So I'm going to be using some Vallejo Game Color Sick Green for the little bit of flesh that's visible. And for all the metal areas, I will be mixing some Mechanicus Standard Gray and Administratum Gray to get something just a little bit lighter than the Mechanicus Gray on its own. I'm also going to put some extra Administratum Gray on the palette because I'll need it later. For the purple areas, I'll be base coating them with some Game Color Hexed Lichen. So with the green here, it's going to be basically the small exposed limbs which are between the armor plates and the feet. They're very, very small. So I'm going to actually just kind of really slop the color in here and not worry too much about how accurate I'm being. I'm also going to completely paint the bottom in green, even though it's probably going to become mostly black by the time I get done inking. Now the bottom of the model doesn't really matter too much because of course it's going to be on a base, but it is going to be a clear acrylic base, so the bottom will matter just slightly more than it might in other games because there is at least a potential you'll see it. Now it actually has a tiny little face here. You can see there's some very, very small teeth. I'm really not going to worry about those when I'm painting this, to be honest. I'll probably just pick them out with a nice light color when I get around to painting the face itself. So before I jump into the grays, I'm going to start with the purple because it's sort of the more recessed area here. And again, I'm just going to kind of really just smash the color in there. Now, of course, this is a non-standard color scheme. This isn't anything close to the box art. This is just something I came up with. The nice thing about comic style painting is it really lets you work with bright, bold colors quite easily. And comic book color schemes basically mean anything goes. You know, there's a whole series of characters that made purple-green combinations pretty popular. You look at Lex Luthor or, Green Goblin. Now, I'm going to want to paint the eyes purple, but I'm probably going to have to come back in afterwards and do that. I'm going to get some base color on there now. I have a feeling when I go to start inking these, I'll probably just blow that away entirely by accident just because the ink is going to be, flowing from the brush, and those eyes are very small. So chances are, even after I'm done all the inking, I'll have to pick the eyes out. Alright, so I'm going to mix the gray up here. So this is going to be roughly half and half Administratum Gray and Mechanicus Gray from Citadel. I'm going to start with the feet. Mostly so I'm giving the purple I just slopped on a little more time to dry. So now I'm going to go ahead and start getting as many of these surfaces with the metallics as I can. I might have to wait for the purple in a few cases. And for the lower jaw and the sort of bottom side of the head here, I'm going to wait just a minute and probably do that with a finer brush. Now this sort of finned area back here, I think I might actually want to fill that with purple. I haven't decided yet. So I'm going to start with a gray for now, but I might change my mind. Of course, the underside of the armor there, and sort of the back side of it as well. Don't want to leave those alone. Alright, so I'm going to try and work on the head here. The one thing to keep in mind with comic style is that it's very forgiving because you're going to be adding these nice thick black lines between details. And so that means if your paint spills a little bit over one detail onto the next one, you know, if you accidentally, you know, paint over something just a little bit, it's usually not a problem because the black line is going to cover a lot of those mistakes anyway. So I'm trying not to fill that eye with paint. It's a very, very small detail though. I have a feeling I'll have to come back in with just the very light purple later on and just touch a little color to it. Alrighty, so there's our base coats down, nice and quick. It's going to mix up some highlight colors for the greens. There's not a lot of it to do. So as before, I'm going to be using some Reaper Dungeon Slime, and I'll be mixing that 50-50 with the Sick Green and then finishing with the Dungeon Slime Pure. So as I said, there's not a whole lot of this green flesh to do, and a lot of it's going to end up being blacked out anyway, but I'm going to get the highlights on now and worry about the black later. And I accidentally got a little on the foot, but I can fix that later. Now coming in with the pure Dungeon Slime. Alright, and that's really it for the green. Again, we're probably not going to see most of that, but it's better to paint it now and worry about that later. So before I start into the grays, I'm going to want to start highlighting the purple a little bit. So I'm going to begin doing that with some Vallejo Warlord purple. Now, when you want to make things glow in comic style, you basically have to bring them almost to white. So like this doesn't really look like it's glowing, it just looks like, you know, they're pink. So I got a little bit of work to do here. So what I'm going to do now is get some P3 Mora White on the palette. So I'm going to take a little bit of this P3 Mora White and actually paint a very bright highlight on some of these little fins in here. And similarly a little bright spot on that let's call it a jewel for lack of a better word. Now here, these are getting smaller and smaller. And small details is where comic style starts to struggle because of the black lining. It's harder to do the lines between just really, really small things. So we may end up just kind of leaving these purple without the black lines at all, and that may help as well with the artificial impact of glowing to them. I'm going to play this by ear just a little bit as I go. This is my first sort of experiment with mixing, I guess we'll call it OSL, object source lighting, with comic style. I haven't really done that yet. So with those down, I'm going to come back in with a little bit of the Warlord purple and add some water to make it nice and translucent. And finally, I'm going to come back in with a little bit of the P3 Moro white again and just add a spot highlight to each of these. So I've gone ahead and completed the purple aspects on both sides of the model, and also just cleaned up the gray around them because I did spill the purple out just a little bit in a few areas, so that's now done. So now I'm going to begin highlighting the gray. And to do that first, I'm just going to come in with straight Administratum gray here. I'm bringing just a little bit of water into it just to improve its flow. I'm going to start with the feet. Now they're pretty simple shapes. They're basically just a triangle with a sort of little groove in each side. So I'm just highlighting once above and once below the groove. Now there's these sort of side sections of the carapace. I'm going to highlight them next. They're very much like an upward facing surface. They're going to be quite bright, to the point where I may just highlight the whole area with this color and let some white carry the rest of it. I'm going to leave just a little bit of the original gray showing. So here we've got an area where there's an overhang. So there's actually going to be a bit of a shadow in here. So I want to make sure I'm bringing the highlights to this outer edge where the light would kind of naturally gleaming off of it. And same here, it's going to kind of focus towards this top area and also sort of just catch on this bottom edge. Now, because I'm aiming for a cel-shaded or a comic look, I don't need to worry about having super ultra smooth transitions with my, highlights and so on. It's really okay if they're quite blocky, and even adds to the artistic style of this. So I don't need to worry about smoothing out these transitions. Then here the bottom jaw has sort of almost like a bit of an underbite. Just going to try and come along the teeth and grab the jaw itself there. Then I'm just going to spin the model and repeat most of those same motions. Alright, with those done, I'm going to mix a little bit of Moro white into the Administratum gray first before I go to a pure white. So this is pretty close, but we want to go just a little bit further after this, just a few point highlights. Now, I wouldn't worry much about bringing an edge highlight in, especially to these bottom edges, because I'm probably going to do a black outline on them anyway. So I'm going to come in with just the pure white and just really accent a few of these. Now, if you're going for metallic look, you might want to add just some extra points of white in just a few other places to kind of give the impression of maybe other light sources glinting off. Or some, surface imperfections in the metal causing some extra reflections. Things like that. With large flat surfaces like this too, it'll also help to add some sort of reflective points as opposed to just linear or blended details. Now when you flip the model and start working on the other side, consider making your highlights look a little different. You don't want to necessarily mirror them. That'll help, add to the illusion of something in motion and something a little less static if your highlights aren't just symmetrical. Now if you don't get that sort of feel from this stage, you can certainly carry that in the black lining stage as well. Now those fins on the sort of underside here, I don't want to come in all the way with white. I'm going to bring just a little bit of the administratum gray just to a few edges. I don't think I'm going to make them purple like I had been discussing earlier. I think that's probably enough. It's a good place to get some nice black linear detail as well, you know, once we start working that in. So now it's time to bust out the black ink. And so for that, I'll be using some Daler Rowney acrylic black. I'm going to begin by just outlining the different details, and then I'll take things further after that. So when I started the Belchers, I started by separating the feet from the rest of the model, but their feet are a lot easier to do than this guy. So my apologies if these camera angles are a little bit weird. I may have to look at it from some really weird angles to get a feel for just how different details break down. Of course, one of the beautiful things about the comic style is if you're ever in doubt as to what a detail is, and it's on the bottom of the miniature, you just black it out. Just get rid of it. See, I thought most of this green was going to go, and it looks like I was right. There's not going to be a lot of it left by the time we're done isolating these components. You know, that's really not what this model's about. This isn't a fleshy guy like the Belchers. This guy's carrying all his power in this show, which explodes. So one little mistake I just noticed I made is this little flange right here is actually the continuation of this armor plate, and I painted it green, whereas it's actually all gray over here. So I'll come in with a little bit of gray after and touch that up. Yeah, and then around the post, I'm just going to do solid black. This is, you know, the very, very shaded belly. And I'll pull some hatch shadows out of that afterwards. I changed my mind just a little bit. I'm going to really go to town with the black there. Almost just obliterating the belly. And get the underside of the legs as well, because you just shouldn't see them. Couldn't even get the underside of the feet at this point, but that's okay. And then we'll leave just a little bit, you know, under the head here visible. So now I'm going to begin putting the black outlines between the armor plates. So this lip under the armor, so this overhanging area, I'm just going to make that completely black. And what that's going to do is, when the model is viewed from certain angles, it's going to help create the illusion of a nice thick black outline, which just makes it look a little more comic-y. Comic-y is definitely a word, by the way. Here I'm painting the overhang all black, but I want to make sure I don't paint the head. This is a little bit nerve-wracking. Now the head has this very small sort of crest detail, so I'm just going to very lightly outline that. And then I want to outline underneath the eye here. And just come across the top of those teeth and hopefully leave them just looking a little bit jagged. I think we're good there. So next I'm going to bring just some small detail lines to the feet. Just to match what was on the Belchers. Just sort of exaggerating that crease along the foot. Right, so technically this is done, but it's a little bit boring. I want to do more to really accent this piece, make it look better. So one thing we can do is start to grab these sharp overlapping edges and just lightly blackline them from the top. What that'll do is give us a nice sort of outlined look from different angles. Now here you can see I left a little bit of color along the edge, so I just want to make sure I kind of grab the edge of the brush and clean that up. And there, that does a lot to really extend that comic look, so I'm going to just continue that around the rest of the model. I'm going to want to do that along this crest in the middle as well. And then we're going to start bringing in our cross hatching. This is probably the most nerve-wracking part because I want to basically keep a nice straight line all the way along this edge. Or at least most of it. So I'm going to bring it up here. Bring it up about, a third of the way like that. And then pick it up about a third from the back again and just carry it back out. And we'll sort of have an area where it just looks a little bit brighter. So now it's time to start adding in that crosshatch. I'm going to bring that sort of where plates overlap, I'm going to pull it out of them. And here, kind of similar to the top, I want to just extend that middle line a little further. And you don't always have to cross hatch, you can just kind of scribble in some black in some places too. If you want a deeper shadow, just really go with it. And of course, it's only cross hatching if you actually do, more than one set and cross them. Otherwise, it's just hashing. And then on the Belchers, I pulled lines up sort of from the bottom of the feet to make them look darker. So I'm just going to repeat that process here. And then just a nice strong outline across the bottom of the foot. Then we want to pull a little bit of hashing out of the green areas. There's not a lot of it left, so I don't want to go too far. But we really just need to hint at the fact the green is there. We don't need a lot of it left. And again, this little bit here I've got to fix. It should actually be gray. Those are a little too uniform. I actually wanted that a little more spaced out. The brush went very wide on that stroke. So what I'm going to do instead is just kind of repeat that here and make it look a little more intentional. So we're getting pretty close here. There's not a lot left to do. I'm going to really bring some shadows out at the bottom of the chin here. And kind of shade this, underhanging part of the top of the head. So last thing we want to do is just start adding some detail in the form of just surface imperfections. And this, I don't really have a process for. There's not a recipe. I don't have a specific guide. I'm not using reference artwork. I'm just kind of working my way around and doing what I think looks good. Adding some deeper areas. Some scratches and dents. And it's not, like I said, there's not a specific rhyme or reason to each individual one. It's just sort of the cumulative effect of it looking a little bit chipped and worn, and maybe having some shadows nearby. Just little things like that. I might actually try to work a bit of a dark spot up in here. A really cool thing to do would be to study how chrome is drawn in comic books as well. Look at some of the old X-Men comics from the 90s or the old X-Men cartoon and just see how they kind of drew chrome, because they did a lot of this sort of thing where they brought in a lot, it was very much informed by the black. So there's a few little areas I just want to touch up very quickly, little mistakes I made. So I'm going to come back to the grays here. And they're actually pretty dry on the palette. Let's see if we got any left. It's like this is just a little too heavy-handed for a small detail like the head. Now it can be a little bit of work trying to cover up black ink with, you know, non-black paint. Just here I felt this line was a little bit too thick, so I'm just thinning that out. And then this little side piece that was green and shouldn't have been, we're just going to bring a little bit of gray onto it. Just enough that it looks like it's painted gray. So one thing I would like to do is try and get these purple areas a little bit brighter. And what I'm going to use for that is some Watercolors Fluorescent Pink. Now this is a day glow reactive pigment, which means it will glow a little bit under UV light. And of course there is a small amount of UV light in regular sunlight as well as basically everything else. So it should add some really interesting color to this. It does look a little bit weird on camera before you start painting with it. So if it looks really strange on the palette, I do apologize. Yeah, I think that's better. So I've done both sides there now, and last thing I want to do is just bring a little bit into the eyes. So you can see under this eye, it's just barely noticeable, but it did bleed out a little bit, and there was a bit of a white highlight there that it just hit, which we didn't have on this side. What I'm going to do is just give that paint a minute to dry, because I did sort of leave, you know, a bit of a blob of it there. And I'm just going to get that little white highlight under each eye to finish it off. So here I'm just taking a very small white highlight and just bringing it along the teeth, just to make them stand out just a little bit more. Alright, and there's the completed crawler. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this video. There's plenty more here on YouTube. You can also join me twice a week at twitch.tv/epicduckstudios on Thursday and Sunday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern, where I do stream my painting live. If you want to support the show, you can do that at patreon.com/epicduck. Even giving as little as $1 a month helps keep the lights on and the paint flowing. You can also help by hitting subscribe here on YouTube or sharing this video with some friends. Thanks a lot!